Hey friends, how you doing today? Oh, I tell you, have you ever really wanted to bring up a topic or talk about something, but it seems so volatile in today's society? Today's topic is really important to me. I have wanted to do a topic on this with this author for such a long time, and he has finally graced us and agreed to come on the show. Let me tell you what it's a little bit about before we get into this. It's on my heart as I watch our families deteriorate. Look at what's happened in the world. I mean, it's crazy town. I mean, who is raising our boys to become men? I think that's what's really important. It seems like men have lost their mojo, or who they are, or what they want to be. And there's an author that I have coming on here with us today who is a Navy SEAL. Yep, you heard me right, a Navy SEAL. He's amazing. And let me just give you a little preface about what he said in the beginning of his book. He says, our absence allowed our manhood to get shoved around and redefined by others by popular culture. While the sheepdogs were away, the punks played. And you know what I love is that he gets right to it. I mean, as a SEAL, yep, there's a couple of little words in there that might be a little salty. You can get over it when you're reading it. And it's directed to men, which is what I absolutely love. But the theme of this book really is more about being a man and how to help our sons become one. Now, ladies, you might be listening going, hey, Shug, this is Women's Hot Topics. How can I be listening to the show? Ladies, you all know who kind of runs that household. Yes, the men do, but I want you to absolutely know you can be putting this in your husband's ear to read, to come in, to watch on YouTube, or to go to our podcast, Women's Hot Topics with Shugbury. It's just so important. I think that this topic every man should hear. So let me get in with this. I absolutely can't wait. I want to welcome Eric Davis to our show. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Eric Davis is a former United States Navy SEAL, and I'm so honored to have him with us today. He is the author of Raising Men, Lessons Navy SEALs Learned from Their Training and Taught to Their Sons. Eric has been recognized as one of the premier sniper instructors in the United States military and has served as a master training specialist at the SEAL Sniper School in Coronado, California. He's an expert of technical and physical surveillance and was part of an elite group hand-selected to perform intelligence collection in denied areas around the world. Eric began to master his writing in SEAL teams by designing, writing, and producing numerous final training exercise scenarios. Eric is now the founder and CEO of averagefrog.com. That's all one word, and we'll have that listed on our YouTube. Averagefrog.com, which repurposes the proven performance principles of SEAL teams to help people to live a good life and lead others to do the same. He's also a featured writer on SOFREP.com, NavySeals.com, SpecialOperations.com, and the Loadout Room. Eric lives in Orange County, California with his beautiful wife and is a dedicated and loving father to his 4 adult children. Thank you for keeping our country safe. Eric, I'm so proud to be able to have you on the show. And I want to thank you for going out in the front lines, Eric, and risking your life to keep us safe. God bless America. What do you guys say? Hoo-ha! I don't know. Did I say that right, Eric?
Close. Hoo-yah. Yes.
Hoo-yah. There you
Hoo-yah.
go.
Yes.
Hoo-yah. And all of us who are listening cannot begin to thank you and your teams enough for your heroism, your leadership, and your sacrifice. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what an honor. Now, I just want to preface this ahead of time. This book was written for men. Although I enjoyed it cover to cover, ladies, like I mentioned, get your men in here, get them on listening on YouTube or reading the book. This book is as much of becoming a man as it is about how to train up our sons. And you know what I loved? You get a little inside look as to what the SEALs go through to become, to become a SEAL. I was exhausted just reading the book, but how to apply the principles that have lifelong been built upon in the Navy SEAL program that we can now use in our own families. So, Eric, let me ask you a question. It's a pretty obvious one right from the beginning, but what prompted you to realize you needed to combine your SEAL training with fatherhood?
Well, I'd say even when I was in the teams, I started to notice how much of what I was learning and doing there, I was bringing over into my personal life with my children. At first, it started off like more like an adventure. We're going to go in the water, we're going to climb, we're going to hike, things like that. But then as I was raising them and teaching them and guiding them, I noticed that the very same principles that would allow us to perform in the SEAL teams were the very same principles that would allow them to perform in life. And things like courage and confidence, perseverance, all of these things all make a well-rounded individual as an adult, but also develop a well-rounded child who can become a very functional adult as well. And I just thought they were such unique experiences and a different way to look at parenting, besides kind of the pink and blue ribbon, nothing wrong with it, kind of typical parenting books that were out there, that I didn't feel were necessarily preparing boys or girls for the environment that we are now operating in, which is very different than most people realize.
Now, I know you concentrated on men and boys, which is super important, but do you think that this also could cross the line into women as well and girls?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So I always have to confess this right up front. I actually have three girls and only one son. And when I left the teams, I studied in a kind of an odd business environment. It was with a business philosopher, genius person who really taught me to understand the fundamentals of the environment, of performance, and things like that. So when I teach things, I'm typically teaching things that are fundamental, not so much tactical, not tips, not tricks, like fundamental truths. So they work the same for females as well. I just the publisher, I think what they need though is they have to target a market, an audience to sell the books. So they're both the same.
Sure, sure. You know what I love too about reading this is that not only was it your wisdom and what you'd learned throughout all of the years of the Navy SEAL training, as well as the Navy itself and their training that you brought to this book, but that you had a group of SEAL brothers sharing their parenting advice as well. And at the end of each chapter, you had a little debrief for us on what we just read, some points, some questions to think about. And I really appreciated that. But remember, friends, it's written for men. Now, you speak of how many parents are shucking off their responsibilities to actually influence their children. Can you tell us why you think that and what does that look like to us?
Well, I would say what's happening is, well, if I go to the core of it, what's happening is we live in a very different environment than even when we grew up. So there was something called the Third Industrial Revolution, which was hard work, hustle, just work after working, working, working. And you see a lot of that in this culture now. There's actually a term out there called the hustle culture. So there's this idea that working hard equates success. But then what came along with is what's called the fourth industrial revolution, where things changed. And we can see it now with automation, artificial intelligence, stuff like that. And is our value is no longer based on our ability to throw our body at it. Our value is now based on our ability to create new and novel solutions for an ever-changing environment. And what I see is a lot of parents, instead of learning about that, instead of mastering it, they just keep throwing their body and their souls and everything they got at work. And then by the time they get home, they don't have the time, the energy, or the creativity to really deal with their kids in a functional way. And raising kids, I mean, back in the day, you could go to the factory, punch out a 10-hour workday, come home, drink a beer, ignore little Tommy, let him just play around the carpet, and everything was fine. But now little Tommy, or whoever you insert the name, now has like internet influence, social media, news that's now becoming untrustworthy as far as I can tell, opinions coming left and right. There's so many more things for these kids to deal with that if we don't turn them into fundamentally sound human beings who understand their passion and their purpose so that they can discern what is good and what is bad, then we're going to have additional problems as we continue to go. And we already see them growing in our current environment right now.
You know, it's scary. And I'm just going to hang it out there, ladies. You know, I tell it like it is. This woke culture is driving me nuts. What they're teaching education in school is a girl or boy or girl. I mean, it doesn't even matter how they're born. Stick a pair of earrings on them. And, you know, I hate to be so forward, ladies, but this is what it's all about. And our faith should dictate our identity and who we are in Christ. But what I do really appreciate is that you talked about mistakes parents make. And one of them is, I don't want to pressure my kid. I want them to make their own decisions. What are your thoughts around that?
They're kids. So, if you kind of study some psychology and human performance and personal development, you'll learn pretty quickly that a lot of us are running around with the decisions that we made when we were like in fifth grade. So we decide how to respond to people. We decide how to react to certain conversations. We decide what certain words mean. And if left to our own devices, we're going to maintain that, what I would say is kind of a adolescent way of looking at the world. So as our kids are growing up, if we just let them kind of be, well, what kind of structure do they have? Like, how do they know which way to go, to turn left, to turn right? They're having to make all of these choices. And now these choices are almost certainly life and death almost immediately now. So you've got kids making these major decisions before they even have any kind of life experience or the requisite knowledge and knowledge in philosophy, or knowledge in what's good, knowledge in how they want to be acting, any thoughts about who they want to be when they grow up. So it'd be kind of like letting a kid decide whether or not they like vegetables and letting them live their life, the rest of their life, not liking vegetables, when most of us know that we don't really start liking vegetables till we're a little older. But it doesn't, but these guys are having to make decisions like that, like right away when they're too young to do so.
Mhm.
And that's not the job. Our job is to guide and to lead them, to transform them into very happy, very functional adults.
Well, and you make a great point in the book about that as well, is that you talk about leading from the front. Share with us, if you would, what does that look like to you? What does that mean?
So here's the thing. Um, if we don't know, I think, let me say it like this. So how I would let me back up just a little bit. So we were talking about masculinity. And the best way I can answer that question would be to describe how I think about traditional masculinity. Traditional masculinity is failed now. It's no longer relevant. Traditional masculinity was at a time, again, where we were bred to hunt and fight, and then that continued into working hard in factories and things like that. And the problem with traditional masculinity is it is just a one size fits all deal. So now what's going on is, as our kids are being raised or kids are growing up, and especially boys, they only have one version of masculinity to follow. And if they aren't that version, they're going to be very confused. And then they're going to go searching for other versions that are being marketed to them online. Now, the reason I bring that up is to answer that question. So fundamentally speaking, what I would call modern masculinity, and the same would be true for females, is we need to learn how to use our passions to harmoniously fulfill our personal, financial, and professional purposes. The reason that's important is when you use the word passions in the Christian world for people of faith, we're going to call that unique gifts. Same thing. But when we are using our passions, we know we are operating as our authentic self. So instead of just having to follow all of the dudes with the beards and going into the cold plunges and all of that stuff that traditional masculinity celebrates, and those are great things, but that's just one type of man. Women are now breeding differently. They're attracted to different types of men. We're on computers. We need design. We need to be more creative. There's been kind of a renaissance there. So when we use that formula, passion, harmony, and purposes, then you get rid of all of those problems. And it gives all parents, something to focus on that they can really believe in too. And they won't get knocked sideways just based on what they heard in the news or social media that day.
And you make a really good point of that as well, that if you fall behind and you're not leading, they're going to be watching somebody else and who they should follow. And I think the way you had phrased it was really well said when you said, this is how we want our kids to see us, when you lead from the front. We want them to see us as someone they want to emulate. And then you talk about putting them outside of their comfort zone, in that you want them to be uneasy when you guys are doing functions or things together, to feel uneasy outside of their comfort zone. What does that mean to you?
You can relate it to like working out. Like if we're going to build muscle, build strength, then we're going to have to push it, and it's going to get uncomfortable because what we're doing is pushing something beyond its normal space, its normal limits. That's going to tear muscle down and then allow the muscle to grow back even stronger. Now, when we push their limits, that does a few things. It produces both confidence and courage. So if we're going to push someone beyond their limit, they're going to have to be a little courageous. right? And being courageous doesn't mean the absence of fear, it means taking action despite the fear. So that's how they start developing courage. Confidence, when you push somebody beyond their limits and they actually do it, they ride the bike rather than fall off, or they do the dive or whatever it is, then they start to understand that they can do things that they weren't sure or didn't think they could do. And those things are incredibly important. And that's why it is so vital to really push these guys beyond what they just say they feel like doing, because that's going to leave them stuck right where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a fine line between breaking them, which you don't want to do. So share with us the rubber band analogy, if you would.
Yes. Yeah. So, SEAL training, people are often surprised, even in Hell Week, they're surprised that they stop us and let us eat. You eat 4 times a day in Hell Week. So, Hell Week's probably the best example. The reason they do that is if I were to tell you to drop down and do push-ups and that was it, and I said just go until you just keep going, eventually your body would stop and your arms would give out and you'd fall on the floor, and that would be fine because you can't move anymore. I pushed my body beyond its limits to the point where it's either passed out or completely crumbled, and that's beautiful because you get to stop. But if you stop them before the body gives out, they get to recover. The rubber band gets let go, and then it comes back in, and then you get to do it again, over and over and over again. And you either develop some serious grit and tenacity, or you realize that whatever you're doing is not for you. But one thing or the other is going to happen.
And, many times throughout the whole book, I mean, you talk about that 5.5 mile swim in the ocean, et cetera. It's just crazy. You guys got to pick up the book just to read behind the scenes of a Navy SEAL. But let me share, friends, when he gives examples of what he does with his kids, there is a clause on the very first page when you open it up. And I think it's important to know that his methods are because of his SEAL principles and special training. With that in mind, the examples that he gives might involve situations that are too dangerous for the average child or father. So let's put a little discernment in that when we're reading his examples, which are really good. But you need to take a look at your own life, your own situation, and your own children. You don't have to take things to the extreme, like some things Eric did in the book, which were awesome. I loved it. But do things according to what's comfortable in your life as well to stretch that rubber band so that it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Loved it.
Something on extreme also, and I talk about this when I'm talking about punishment and discipline, which we might get to later, so I won't spoiler alert that.
No, you can
But
go ahead right now.
okay, great. So, one of the things I talk about, remind me about the extreme just in case I forget, but one of the things I talk about with punishment and discipline and things like that is there's a saying called the punishment should fit the crime. Having a Belgian Malinois, which is the same dogs they use in the SEAL teams, I had a Belgian Malinois from that pipeline. I trained her myself to be a protection dog, learned a ton about behavior science. And what really hit me was we don't reward or discipline based on the crime or based on whatever they did. We do it based on the desired behavior. So it's the same. So it's the same thing with an extreme situation. So there's a story in the book about my son, and he got his skateboard busted. PlayStation ended up in the pool. He ended up in the cold pool and things like that. But I had been doing outdoor stuff with my son for years. I knew that would not break my son. I wasn't, whatever he did was not aligned with the quote unquote punishment. The punishment was aligned with the behavior I wanted to change. And I wanted him to remember that forever, because one of the things that happens when you're consistent, parenting your kids, disciplining your kids, training your kids, you don't have that many big moments that you have to handle. Just like a dog, if you're consistent training a dog and you're rewarding them and disciplining them, it doesn't take very much. So when those moments show up, I want to make them bigger so that they actually remember them. When I say I'm going to turn the car around on my way to Disneyland, every once in a while you got to turn the car around just so they know you'll do it, but they'll also remember it, hopefully as a funny story. Once he's out of therapy, I'm sure he'll think it's all fun.
I don't think he's in therapy. He wrote a lot of beautiful quotes about your parenting and how much he respects you, which is amazing. I just thought it
Yeah,
was absolutely beautiful.
thank you.
Another thing you had mentioned is the stakes are too high for us to wing it or depend on our own intuition because, some of us didn't have good parenting to begin with. I did. I was blessed with that. But a lot of people have not as far as fatherhood. And it is time to parent on purpose. It's time to take back what is ours and redefine an entire generation of men, starting with ourselves first and our sons. It's time to get some. I love the way you hit that on the head. Just absolutely love it. I'm going to share, friends, just a little bit, just a little taste of what some of the chapters are. You talk about building the team, leading from the front, which we already talked about. Don't be right, be effective. I thought that was really good, especially when you talked about one of your teammates who wouldn't take the blame for something that had happened. Why is it important that we understand that it's more important to be effective and not right?
Well, if you think about it, if you're in a room full of people and let's say everybody except for one person wants to be right, but there's one person who just wants to be effective. They want to accomplish the mission. They want to get whatever needs to get handled. That person is always going to hold the power. Now, sure, there's all kinds of psychological things going on. There's all kinds of ego going on. But if you think about it at its core, at a fundamental level, the person who's after being effective, they're going to end up making the correct choices, sometimes eventually, but everybody will start to rally around that person and start to follow them. So again, back to the extreme things we may or may not do with our kids, whatever we want to call extreme, or the discipline or anything like that. I'm not after being right. I'm after being effective. And there's another thing that does too. It produces a certain identity with your children and people around you too. A lot of some of this stuff came from business philosophy, but we have to keep a certain identity with our children where they're going to want to follow us, especially when they become an adult. And assuming at some point they will start paying their own bills, I've heard that happens. No, I'm just kidding. My kids do that. My kids do that. But like at some point, they really don't have to listen to you. But if we're going to continue to lead them, we need them to want to. So
Yes.
when we're focused on being effective and not being right, then the apologies go to the kids when they need to be. The explanations of where we went wrong or where we went right are no big deal because we're focused on whatever mission we're after.
And you said it's a beautiful example for your kids. If you screw up, you do something wrong, you admit it to them so they can see that and then they'll receive that as well when it's their time.
Yeah, because when you don't admit it, what are you doing? You're wanting to remain at the perception of being right rather than effective. And kids get that. Even young, I mean, humans do have a tremendous BS meter. It's part of our survival. So even when they're little, when a parent does or says something, or why can't I do this because I said no? The kid's like, okay, that's BS. Well, there's no logical reason why. So for something I tell parents, I'm like, well, if it's because you didn't feel like it and you're too tired, just tell them that. Don't, you know what I mean? Just be like, I just
Yeah.
don't want, it's okay just to say I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, some of the other chapters, I read them all. They were amazing. It pays to be a winner. And you talk about that. And you talk about a participation award. We're not going to touch on that right now. But friends, I always hear sarcasm from people. Oh, wow, they get a participation award. They don't keep track of scores. What good is competing anywhere? You talk about both participation and you talk about winning. And so I want you guys to read that chapter. It's very effective. I thought it was really good. The only easy day was yesterday. How true is that? Get off your ass. That was, yeah, absolutely. Get up, get going. And then respect a fight, which I thought was really effective. I would have probably been more like your wife, barging up front. We can talk about that in a minute, and taking back what's mine. And so before we get there, you had left the Navy SEALs after how many years of service?
Total in the Navy, 16 years and I think maybe 7 months or
I
something
mean,
like
wow,
that.
I'm surprised you're alive, honestly, after reading your book. It just was so strenuous. But your son said something to you that moved your heart. Um, Tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to leave the Navy SEALs.
Hold on, you're gonna have to refresh me on that one, Shug.
Oh, he had said he wasn't eating.
What did he say? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't eating, and your wife was frustrated because he wasn't eating. And instead of going in there and disciplining him, why aren't you eating? You need to eat. You pulled him aside in a very kind way and said, why don't you want to eat? And he shared that if I eat, then I'll get big. And if I get big, I become a man. And then I have to go away like you, Dad. And he didn't want that. Did that
Mm.
help refresh your memory?
Yeah, geez, I wrote that. That's
Aren't you
amazing.
glad I read
Yeah,
it?
yeah, no. Well, I wrote the book a while ago. I'm like, wait, what are we talking about here? So that's,
That was, as
yeah,
a mom, that just got me to tears.
yeah. I can give you one more thing he said. We can do it. Let's address that one that really
Okay.
hit me hard very recently too. But that's an example of, I would say, leading from the front. That's an example of being effective rather than being right. Um, that's an example of parenting with intention. And when you parent with intention, one of your intentions would be for your children to like you. And because when you like somebody, here's the thing about leadership. You always choose who you lead, and followers always choose who they're going to follow. If they're being forced, the moment that forced is removed, then the behavior goes away. So it's one of those big moments right there. And I can tell you a very similar moment that happened maybe just a year and a half ago, the very similar. But it's at one of those big moments that just demonstrates that your kid really wants to be around you. And here's the thing, too. If we're going to lead them into the future, if we're going to help develop them, the one thing that we always have to hold on to is the relationship. So for me, at all cost, save the relationship. Don't blow up. Don't do this hammer punishment. Whatever that you think you need to do, take a big breath and be like, okay, at all cost, I must preserve this relationship because the moment I sever it is the moment I can no longer lead them. So that's why that moments like that are so big.
That's such a good point. And you decided to then resign from the SEALs and you spent more time with your kids and you realized the proximity is there now, but you didn't feel the relationship was. It was harder to build that relationship again. Speak to our parenting friends that are frustrated because they're like, okay, I haven't had a relationship with my kids. They're in their teens and young adults now. They don't listen. They put their headphones on. They're doing their video games or going on the internet or out with their friends, etc. Would you share with us a way that they can rebuild a relationship that perhaps might have been lost?
Coming back to relationship, we need to think about first the purpose of that relationship. And I'm going to go back to that thing I said before. If you're committed to using your passions, your gifts, to harmoniously fulfill your personal, financial, and professional purposes, and I know that sounds like a little tagline, but if you were to unpack that one sentence right there, isn't that someone you would want to follow? Isn't
Mhm.
that someone you would want to be like? And it is. And when parents are struggling with the relationship and things matters of respect, oftentimes, and this could be a hard pill to swallow for some of you, oftentimes is you're not acting as somebody to be respected. And it not doesn't mean you have to get the whole passion and fulfill your purposes and get them all done. It's the pursuit of. And yeah, the kids might not fully grasp it as they're younger, but you keep repeating it, you keep demonstrating, and then at some point, I was just on a hike with my daughter and her friends, and one of their friends asked me something, and I launched into these passion. They asked me about being a consultant, and I launched into passion, purpose, and how that all plays into it inside of a corporation, inside a culture. And my daughter, probably the third time I've talked to one of her friends, and the third time she said this to me, like, "I didn't know you did that, Dad." And I'm like, "You're killing me. I've been
She
doing
finally
it."
listened.
Yeah, I'm like, "You are killing me. I've been doing it the whole time." And she's like, "You're right, you have." But then, boom, boom, it all comes together, kind of like in a movie. So if we want respect, we need to act in a way that deserves respect. And that doesn't mean any kind of moral high ground. I mean, be up to something, be doing something that any human being would want to be able to do also. Every human being wants to use their authentic self and fulfill the purposes for which they were created. And that to me is the core of all things inside of parenting.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. You guys were out hiking, and you said that's what really helped you rebond with your son, who was the eldest in the family, is that you took him into the middle of nowhere in a car, way deep, and you guys went camping. And he said it was the best birthday he'd ever had. Why is it important to take kids outside if you've kind of lost their relationship?
Yeah, there's not a lot else out there besides you, and obviously the beauty that's all around you. And the hike too with my daughters and her friends just the other day was the same thing. They are little. One of them is like, "Yeah, I'm a screenager. I'm addicted to my phone." She makes a joke about it, but she's actually also part serious. So for me, I'm like, okay, no problem. So I'm going to change the environment.
Yeah.
And like this is the difference between power and force. And I already alluded to it a little bit ago. But if there's a room full of people and I wanted them to take their jackets off, I could force them to do it. Be like, take your jackets off, or I'm going to start throwing things at you. Now, as soon as I stop throwing things at them, they're going to put their jackets back on. This is force. Power is I could just go turn the thermostat up and make the room warm. So if we're struggling with relationships, struggling to get our children's attention, you're going to have to find an environment where that attention is naturally going to come to you. The
Yeah.
the story about my son with his PlayStation in the pool and everything like that, I don't know if this is in the book, I don't remember, but it concluded on a trail in the middle of the night that was by our house. And guess what happened? He wanted to stay, he was mad. He was upset. He was frustrated. He didn't want to come up alongside me. So I just started walking up the dark hill. And then guess what happened after about 50 yards? Little guy comes right up next to me. So is the difference between force and power, and power comes from the environment.
Yeah.
And it's really good to produce relationships.
And the experience you get. I mean, you even said you love to surf, and your son necessarily wouldn't have loved to surf, but you said, just pick up your stuff and let's just go to the beach. You don't have to surf, just come with me. And so when he did come, he eventually surfed, which is a great thing. And then you have an experience together. I mean, I found that with my own kids, who are definitely adults, that it's best to do things together, have experiences together, get those phones off and the video games. It doesn't matter how old they are because they're all on it, and get them back to what's important, which is what God created, as far as I'm concerned, and to take time and make sure that you do that. You had said too, when the kids were younger, that they had a a time where they had to have like a personal quiet time in the morning, also in the evening, where there was no distractions. And you said it really benefited their creativity. Do you see that now as adults, how that helped them?
The oldest kids, they came up when technology was just coming out. The younger ones, they are born with iPhones in their hands. Right, I mean, so it's very, my particular parenting generation, I had both sets from zero to having it from the get-go. And what they can't understand at that age, and what most adults I see still don't understand, that if we're constantly consuming, we're never going to create. It's like input, it's like eating and never been able to release any of the energy or get rid of it. It just stuffs us. And if you think about that, if you keep inputting and never get to export, it's going to cause all kinds of emotional trouble. It's going to cause
Mhm.
anxiety, it's going to cause depression, it's going to cause nervousness, and just a scattered brain across the board, not knowing what direction to do. So these quiet moments, and this is why I like the outdoors. And I mean, I'm just naturally drawn to the outdoors, but as humans, the outdoors does something to all of us, right? So these spaces where things can go quiet, that's when our brain gets to heal. That's where it gets to process all of the things on its own and start to settle it down. Because all of the dust kicked up in the air doesn't have to be dealt with, right? So when the dust gets kicked up in the air, if you just let it settle, then the only thing you need to deal with are the few chunks of dirt or whatever the analogy you want to use. Then you only have a few things to deal with, and then you can actually take care of those one by one.
And I love too that you talked about nutrition and exercise and the importance of it. And just the other day, we were in Minnesota and it was like 0 degrees out it was very cold.
Oh yeah.
And every day I make a point of getting out, going for a walk, getting some exercise, getting on a treadmill, my Peloton, doesn't matter what it is. I love to work out because what happens is that it clears your head. Doesn't matter how emotionally tired you might be physically, when you get on, you come off that refreshed. And when I came in with icicles hanging on my eyeballs, my husband's laughing, I felt terrific. But the hardest part is just taking that step to get out the door and do it.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's another hack there too. Just get out the door and tell yourself you're not going to do it. Just get
Yeah.
outside and again, you change the environment. That's what we would do during swims and in SEAL training. People would be cold, everything like that. I'm like, just don't go in the water. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just don't plan on going in the water. Just get out there and put yourself in the right space, and then the rest will happen. And it does make such a huge difference. We have to disrupt and reset ourselves multiple times in a day if we're going to perform,
Mhm.
especially when I'm talking about this artificial intelligence and this competitive environment that we're now operating in, especially in that, because creativity is key.
Hmm.
That's why we need to have passion. That's why it has to be pointed at our purposes because we need to create new and novel solutions if we're going to be valued in a way that's going to give us the time and energy we need to come back and take care of our kids and take care of ourselves. And
Hmm.
respect and authority, if you're not taking care of yourself, that's another thing for your child to look at and be like, okay, there's a crack here, there's something missing because they're not doing what I know they ought to do because the kids are getting taught that. Maybe not trained into how to do it, but they are getting taught about health and how that all works.
I had to laugh when one of your examples the kids had mentioned is that you guys had gone to a movie, had popcorn, big thing of popcorn, and they'd all get in the car and dad would go run 10 miles to get home.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. Always active. You know, they see that. That's contagious. I love that you emulate exercise is important. Get outside, stay fit, lead in the front, like you talk about. But I do want to take a minute and talk about failure. And why is it important for your kids to try and to fail? And the reason I bring this up and why it's so important to me is because I see two different types of kids today, especially in the older, a little bit older generation now in their late 20s, early 30s, late 30s, is that they find that, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to quit my job. Or, oh, I'm just going to move on and this doesn't fit for me. And you talk about very eloquently about how us as parents have failed in some regard in that order as they become adults. Share with us what you meant by that and what that looks like.
Yeah, so failure obviously is just a stage. And I think maybe how I would frame this, and I'm going to go back to that kind of competitive nature of our environment and how it applies. Think about somebody who's doing something that cannot be done without thousands and thousands of attempts and then thousands and thousands of hours mastering it. Those people are typically highly valued. If you really think of like, why do we watch certain people on TV? Why do we watch certain athletes and things like that? What they're doing is demonstrating something that none of us can just show up and do. So to get there, they had failed many, many times. And if I come back to that whole passion to fulfill your purposes, like think how many people are actually harmoniously caring for all of their purposes. Very, very few. And still very, very few people even trying, don't even have that narrative. They're not even trying. So that puts us on alert. That tells us something like, okay, these things that we're looking to do to live a whole, healthy, and authentic life, they're not very common. There's not a way to do it. So that means I'm going to have to try multiple versions until I get this thing right. So if they want to live an exceptional life that is uncommon, which living a good life these days is getting more and more uncommon, then they need to learn how to fail on repeat. And there's a way that you fail if you, I just was writing about this today for one of my courses. If you fail correctly and you loop back around and you make the modifications, then you're going to eventually hit your target. You're going to eventually get to where you want to go. And it is a incredibly necessary. If you go back to that whole, the environment has changed. We could show up, go to a factory, learn how to do things that were already in place. We just learned how to do it. And now what we're doing, and all these kids, that's part of their confusion with careers and stuff like that. They're coming into an environment like where what they need to do to live the kind of life they need to live, that they want to live, has not been invented. And the only person that can invent it is them. So if
Mhm.
you're going to invent something new, as we know, failure is it's not failure. When they say failure is not an option, it's like failure is the only option,
Mhm.
right? That's the only way to get there. So a very important thing for kids to learn. It's a
Yeah.
process.
And as parents, we have failed in some areas, like, and not in a good way, but how you had talked about how we pick our kids up and we take them over the difficulty and sit them back down like we're
Oh,
protecting them when actually we're harming them from becoming fruitful people who want to grow stronger. Amazing that you had said as a Navy SEAL during your training that you had come to the realization that your leaders, the people that are directing you, um, and I can't remember the correct term, commanders, what would they be called? The people above you telling you what to do.
it depends on the environment, but we you can call them platoon officers
Okay, the
or
officers.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Well,
Anyways,
officers and enlisted, yes.
you came to the realization that they're not making you do these things. They're telling you how to, I mean, they're explaining to you, and you talked about them kind of being the foundation, and you're the one who's growing through it. You get to do these things. And it really changed your mindset, which I really appreciate. It went from negativity to positivity instead of I'm hurting and this is very difficult and I don't think I can finish to I can't wait to see how this is going to benefit me in the long run. You're going to become stronger. You're going to become more able to do things you hadn't done before. And I think that's really what's important about failure or looking at it in that direction is that you can keep your mindset positive. I can do this. I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to have a goal, like you said, a purpose. So I thought that was really helpful in my head.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, some, in conclusion, I want to talk about adults for a little bit, adult kids.
Hmm.
Um, You had said, all of my life, all of my kids have been brought up experiencing the consequences of the actions and situations that they cause. If left unchecked, our children can carry a commitment to being right rather than effective, which we had talked about, into adulthood and find themselves constantly making up reasons why they are the way they are. And that's what you hear, like the victim mentality. And you talked about that. There's no victim mentality in your house. And why they did or did not do something. You also said you took a mention about a man who doesn't take possession of his failures or blames somebody else. I call it the blame gun. You're always blaming somebody else, and how ineffective that is. And your kids can see that, and they are raised in that. So oftentimes they're like, "Well, it's not my fault. It's my boss, or it's my coworker, or whoever I'm working with." And so, as your children reach adulthood, it's time for them to walk their own path. And the truth is, neither of you has ever been where they want to go. Oh my gosh. This is why I have faith, Eric, is because I can't tell you how many times I've been on my knees for my kids because none of us have been there yet
Yeah.
together. It's just such a walk of faith. If they want to travel a path that your experience tells you is the wrong direction, you're going to have to let them go and hope that the lessons you've taught them over the years will stay with them. It's time to test their ability to put being effective over being right. And I think the way you had phrased it as well, which was really effective, is that you have to allow them to make their own choices, but yet you're still alongside them as a loving parent. And I thought that was really a beautiful way to put that. Otherwise, they become a sand dart, is what you said. They fall, boom, pop right into the sand. I loved all these Navy SEAL analogies. They were absolutely great. Can you share with us what might be one of the most important things you've learned as your children have become adults that has been effective?
So it'll be a little bit of a broken record. But before I say, I'm going to repeat myself because it's important for people to hear this. But before I say it, I'll share with you that story about what my son said recently that was just similar to the quote. We were sitting in Laguna Beach, outside of a cafe, just hanging out and talking like we do. And he was talking about a potential career move, a couple different things. I go, like, look, like, just tell me, like, what kind of lifestyle? Like, tell me, what kind of life do you want to live? Let's not worry about career, everything. Because that one thing people go wrong is they think job first and then they try to stuff their life into it. And that's just backwards. Like,
Yeah.
who are you? How do you want to live? What kind of lifestyle do you want? Like, what kind of world are you talking about? And he goes, I want to live one like yours, Dad.
Oh,
So and that was recent. That was a big one. That still will get me choked up a little bit.
yeah.
And all I can say, and I'll try to use different words this time.
I know
If
you're fine.
Well, it's the passions to fulfill your purposes. And again, but I really want people to hold on to this, no matter what's going on around them. If they're centered, like, okay, passion means I'm being my authentic self. If you're a believer, you can connect the dots and say, okay, I have particular gifts I've been given. I can tell they're inside of me because when I do them, I enter into what they call a psychological state of flow. Like everything turns off, I just keep going. I'm creative, I'm tenacious, I forget about time, I forget about food. Like, okay, this is my inherent self. Right? This is truly me. So if they hold, like, think about that one. Like, okay, that person is now being them. And then you point that thing at the purpose. Think the definition of purpose, a reason for something for which something exists, the reason why
Mhm.
something was created. So if you're pointed at your purpose and you're getting it down, there's multiple ways. Purpose is not something you figure out on top of a mountain either. It is a very pragmatic process to identify and some design inside of your purpose. And you can do that with people, with culture, but one of the best ways to do it is with God.
Yes.
So if you're locked onto your purposes, and you believe you're getting a download from God, or you're at least giving him the opportunity to speak into it, right? Through all the stuff that we want, but at least he's getting the opportunity. Life is going to work out pretty well. It's going to work out really well. And us as parents, and I want to remind everybody of this, even if we don't get all of those purposes fulfilled, even if we crash doing it, our kids are watching us try, and they're also seeing the impact of our life. When you're
Mhm.
using your passion to fulfill your purposes, you're a pretty happy, joyful person. You're not dealing with a lot of the trauma and things that other people are dealing with because a lot of that stuff's behind them. When you're working with passion and purpose, everything is now in front of you. And then when you put your head down to do whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, you are now 100% present in the moment. Anyways, point being, that human, it's not just kids, adult kids, minor kids, it doesn't matter. Human beings are designed for those two things. They are going to gravitate towards it once the smudge gets off of them and they can start to see it over and over again. That's why it takes
Yeah.
repetition. That's why I repeat myself a lot too, my poor kids.
Yeah, at my age, repetition is good.
Oh, yeah.
I think, God has clearly played a role in your life as a Navy SEAL as well as a parent, and now it's passing on to your own children as well. And you said if there's one thing I wanted you to take away from reading this book is that there's absolutely no reason to think, look how this guy raised his kids and I blew it. My kids are already gone. They're in college, they're adults, they have their own kids. It's never too late to reconnect, you said, to re-engage and to rally up. It's never too late, friends, to say, I love you or I'm sorry. The best part about making mistakes is finding solutions. I love that attitude. Find a solution for your mistake and maybe redemption. And don't forget to pray. That's my words. Don't forget to pray, friends. Give it to God. Surrender yourself to Him. Surrender your kids to Him and ask God to guide you as far as being a parent. The parenting thing is still going to keep going. So get going with it. You say that a couple times. I love it. And this is a quote from your son, which really made me want to cry.
Hmm.
This is what he said. Now that I'm adult, my dad is both father and friend to me. And depending on what we are doing activity wise, those roles can easily change order. My father's advice and knowledge is some of the best I know. And to this day, if he issues a rare command, whether in a high risk situation or not, I will immediately follow it because I truly believe that it would be in my best interest to do so. I think you've done it right, friend. That just tells it like it is.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a tearjerker.
Yeah, it is. It was beautiful. Before we close, can you share with us, first of all, what are some of the things that you have on the horizon and that you're already doing? And how can our friends get hold of you if they want you to speak at a corporate event or another event?
I'm a one-trick pony. All I do is teach people how to use their passions to fulfill their purposes. Surprise, surprise. I have an online membership where I have different levels of groups, really depending on where somebody's at performance-wise. So if they do the www.averagefrog.com or whatever, they'll be somewhere, something will be somewhere around there or me on social media to get on a list or something like that. Once they're on that list, then I got them. So they're
Mm.
in there. And then when I open up a course or I, obviously give resources for all kinds of stuff. So that's all there. Right now, I'm currently under contract to write the second book, which I had mentioned. It'll be something like Leading Men because the training never ends. And it'll be pointed, guess what, at us leading from the front. And then the examples and analogies will be now pointed towards adult children.
Yeah.
Uh, and that is actually it. I just live, eat, breathe, sleep. It's all I do. I wake up in the morning, use my passions to fulfill my purposes, and then my purpose is to help other people use their passion to fulfill the purpose. That's all I do because
I love it.
it's encompassing. It'll take
Yeah.
care of it'll clean up everything.
I thought it was great when you talked about Navy pups in the book. I
Oh,
don't know
seal
if you're still,
pups.
oh, what is it? Seal pups. Yeah, you're
Seal
right.
pups. Yeah, yeah.
Are you still doing that?
No, we did that when they were little. We did a couple things with their friends and everything and stuff like that. I did have people talk to me about developing it into like an official thing, which I wouldn't. I'd probably be open to that now more. But when my kids were young, I was like, okay, them, their friends, people around us. That was my focus. But it's taking these principles and developing some of the tenets too. Like I said, courage, confidence, perseverance, communication, all of those things with the kids. And it's just a great way to.
I love it.
former
Say,
relationship.
I'm just so in awe and appreciative of all you and your Navy SEAL teams have done for our country. And I can't thank you guys enough. Can't thank you enough. How can our listeners be praying for you, Eric?
Oh my goodness. Boy, I would say I always have a really, really similar prayer is I always want to make sure that I'm in God's will, not my own. Because hasn't been as good as his so far. So I'm just gonna go with his. So praying that I'm in his will, not my own. Because sometimes doing this work, you're swimming in all these words and everything like that, and I'll forget to pop my head up and be like, "Wait, God, is that what you wanted me to do? It's been, months. I've been writing this for months. That's a big one."
Yeah, praise God. Let me pray for a minute if I can for our
Yes.
listeners. Oh, Father God, thank you so much for this time with Eric Davis. I think so much, Lord, that you have used him mightily for your glory through the Navy SEALs, Lord, through his experiences, through risking his life and his surrender to you, Lord. I thank you for his family, his wife, and his children. And I thank you, Lord, so much that you will continue to protect him and use him mightily for your good. Father God, if somebody's listening who has not had the best experience with their children to this point, would you prompt them to surrender to you, to ask you into their life, to guide you, just like Eric had said, and that you would be in their will? It's not too late. And may today be the day that your children will rise up and be the men that God created them to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Eric. I hope you come back again with that continuing book that you're supposed to be writing and finishing, because I would
Yes.
love to do an interview on the adult children side of it as well.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, I'd love to for sure.
Thank you, Eric. And you guys, Shugbury here. You know I love you. Over and out.